All right. Welcome to the Deprogram show. I'm your host, RMJR. We got a very special guest in the building, host of the Tulis report on 92.7 FM Nougat Radio, the one, the only, the smartest man with a bow tie, David Tulis. What's going on, my brother?
Well, Roland, thank you for coming to talk with me, or having me come to talk with you. I'm really honored that you want to have me on Deprogram. I think what I have to offer in the way of traffic stop abuse and reform requires deprogramming to understand the issue correctly, because if we understand it correctly legally, we have solutions that come into view. And it's a kind of a deprogramming process about what your rights are and the rights of the viewer, and the powers that the police have, which are really limited in my analysis. They're much more limited than we think.
Okay. So first question, we're going to go on and jump right into it. Tell the people what's the difference between a driver and a traveler.
Well, your question gets right to the heart of the problem, Roland, and it's this. A traveler is someone who moves his body from point A to point B by any means, but when we're talking about cars and trucks and roads where traffic stops happen, we're referring to people who are in their cars or trucks or on their motorbikes privately using the road to exercise their rights, to fulfill their necessities like shopping or going to the doctor, going to the drugstore, grocery shopping, or doing things that are private in nature. They're not for profit. And driving now is legally a distinct activity. It is a subcategory of travel, and it's the part that the police theoretically have power over. It's the part that the state has an interest in and has power to regulate in the public interest, so-called, which is to say that the police have power to regulate the commercial use of travel in the interest of public safety, health and welfare, and morals, and which is the police power defined in short form. And so when you're driving, Roland, or your viewers is driving or transporting or operating a motor vehicle, that is something that arouses police interest, and over which I would say generally police have authority to regulate and check in on. Okay, traffic stops that we have repeated cases of in the past 2 or 3 weeks that are just horrendous. We have shootings. We have the Lieutenant Nazario traffic stop at the gas station. That's all under the pretense of regulating driving and regulating by police power operating a motor vehicle. So he's presumed, the officer was presumed, the military man who's the victim is presumed to be operating his car as an operator and driver in commerce, where there is theoretically power to check on things, or power to stop you for not having that indicator light on, or touching the white line with your tire without making a turn, or you have a tag light out. Those are all pretexts, and as your viewer knows, these are how the judicial industrial complex rounds up Black people especially, and poor people especially, into the court system for fines and fees and rentals by for-profit businesses that prosper on the jails being full of people.
Mr. Tulis, let me ask you this. First question, why do you think that, or do you think that they have the people thinking that they are driving when they're really traveling?
Yes, everybody makes a mistake. It's a legal mistake to make, to think that when you go to church, or you're going to work, or you're picking up your sons from basketball practice, or you're taking your daughter to her first job at the Chinese restaurant across town, that you are driving. Everyone makes that mistake, and that's because the legal fault we've made as people goes back to the 1930s. It's a custom in American life. It's Americana to get your driver's license and so on. Everyone talks about driving their cars, and the legal distinction in the common usage of the way people talk is lost. But there is still the legal distinction between travel and use of the road and self-propulsion on one side. Self-propulsion is moving privately. And then on the other side, transportation, trucking, shipping, being a carrier for hire. Now, this category over here is what's regulated by the police power. Now, I would say there's a distinction to be made there too, but I won't worry about it now. And in a nutshell, it's this, that the highway patrol is the sole authority in law that by my research, that has the power to stop people. And police and sheriffs use the police power that they claim to have on transportation, trucking, shipping, hauling, cab operating, taking door dashing, that kind of thing. They have that power, and they're using it against these people over here who are simply privately using. And that's where your violence takes place. That's where cops get shot. That's where people get dragged out of their car. That's where Diana Watt here in Chattanooga got dragged from her car two summers ago. Her court case, a traffic case, lasted 550 days, more or less, by my reporting. She had 7 hearings before she got indicted. Can you believe that? I mean, this poor woman, African-American, typical story. It's the use of that law by the city cops in Chattanooga, I argue, is illegal and illicit. And my project that I hope we can talk about is to put the city on notice, and the county in Chattanooga and Hamilton County and others on notice about the limits in the law. And the limits are that cops can't use the pretext of traffic infractions, which are not crimes. They can't use the pretense of the taillight out to stop people as if that was probable cause for a crime pursuit. Okay, probable cause for a crime is a very high standard. The traffic rules are a very low standard of stopping people. Okay, every traffic stop is an arrest. They should be operating here. They saw you commit a crime. They had a warrant for your arrest. They had a warrant to search your car, but they don't use this one. They use the one down here, which is your taillights out. This is the transportation law. They've got no authority to arrest people and then charge them for paper offenses on this standard. They have to use this one. So the notice that I've given, that I hope we can talk a little bit about and how to use it, that is based on my analysis of the law and the court cases.
Okay. You also mentioned they target African Americans and poor people. Why do you think that is?
Well, poor people often have distractions. Many African Americans are undercapitalized. They're not generally very wealthy. They live in poorer sections, and the maintenance of their cars often is not as great as if you have money. If you're flush with money, you can more easily maintain your lights and your car and so on. So they're easy targets for police. Police believe that Black people tend to be dishonest. They tend to be involved in grifting, shifting, stolen goods, drugs, and so on. So they use the reduced standard of probable cause, this low one here, to stop them, turn a traffic stop into a DUI or a drug bust. That's the goal. Get people into the system. It's a systemic problem. That's why you call it systemic racism, because the system operates without anybody personally not liking Blacks. Okay, it doesn't work because cops don't like Black people. They like Black people. Okay, but this is the system that operates systemically against them, using the lower standard of probable cause so that they can lawfully stop you, turn your taillight case into a drug bust or a drug stop or a drug search. That's what and that's why I call it Jim Crow. And traffic enforcement is the main arm of Jim Crow. That's the main element of Jim Crow. Jeanette, would you mind closing my door, please?
And I would be also very careful.
So,
Hang on a second.
All right, go ahead.
Sorry, forgive me.
Oh, no problem. So basically what you're telling me is, and what you're telling the viewers are, they don't even really have the jurisdiction to make, like, if you're traveling, they don't have the jurisdiction to make your tail light an arrestable offense, but they use your tail light and things of that nature to trigger other things that they might They really looking for the drugs and stuff like this, but they're using your tail light and things of that nature as bait.
Well, it's not bait so much as pretext. It's a reason that looks good that's supported by the courts. Now, the problem that we face in trying to end traffic stops, which is my goal, to end traffic stops entirely upon private users. That would be everybody who's looking at this interview, because they're illicit and it's called ultra vires. Ultra vires in Latin is outside the view. I want to stop them because it's like this. It's a foot wide law, but it's enforced as if it were a yard wide. Okay, so they're enforcing the law as if it were this big, but it's really only this wide. Okay, it covers truckers, right? 18-wheelers, dump truck operators, hearses, cement mixers, ambulance services, courier services, flatbed operators, logging trucks, cabs. Those are the kind of people that are subject to transportation because they make a living on the road. Their living is on the road itself. So they're subject to safety requirements, licensing requirements, registration of car as a motor vehicle. That's a requirement to be in commerce. And then finally, insurance. And poor people often get tripped up on insurance because they can't afford it. It's, several $100s every 6 months. And that's a bill that people say, I can't afford that. I just can't make that. So they travel without all the protections, if you will. And then expired licenses, revoked licenses for unpaid court fees and court fines. I talked with one woman who had $18,000 in build up on court fees and fines that she couldn't pay. She didn't have a driver's license and was in East Ridge City Court on a traffic charge. That is structural racism because it works upon the black man very strongly, disproportionately, and then poor people who don't have an answer, they can't afford lawyers, they can't keep their cars up in tip-top shape, and they're prey for police. Police don't go after white guys with bow ties, okay? They won't. You're a black man, 17, with 2 friends in a car on a Friday night. They're going to stop you for some reason. They're going to find a reason to stop you so that they can talk with you and inspect your car and look into the trunk. And that's why the traffic stop, the traffic arrest, every stop is an arrest for Fourth Amendment purposes. Every traffic stop is a breach. And what I've done, Roland, is I've put the city of Chattanooga on notice, and I did that 1,163 days ago. There's not been any response or answer by the city attorney's office. We have a new city attorney, by the way, named today.
Yeah, I saw that.
I'll be meeting with her. And Mayor Kelly in Chattanooga is open to some of the reforms I've been arguing for some time, but he doesn't get the main issue. The main issue that we want to program ourselves to understand correctly is that there is an answer, but it's kind of hard to arrive at, partly because the courts of appeal support the Jim Crow commercial enforcement system on these people exercising their rights. So a woman going for an abortion in Nashville, which is a right under the Constitution, they say, she can't go there on her own. She has to do that by state permission. She has to do that commercially with a driver's license and insurance and a tag that's proper for commerce. She can't privately go to exercise a private right. She has to go into commerce. She has to enter into commerce as a carrier, which all driver's licenses make you a carrier. As a carrier, that's a legal concept to be a hauler or carrier. And they're saying, well, you can't go there. You can't go to church. You can't go to a political rally. You can't take part in a protest against the Floyd killing in Chattanooga. You can't get there without getting our permission by being a licensee and being in commerce and having that insurance. So those are the traps that they've set for us, and the courts uphold it. So my notice deals with the fact that the courts support this abuse, and we can't beat this abuse back structurally. We have to beat it back individually, one person at a time. Your listener and me on the road, knowing what our rights are and knowing the limits on the cops' power.
Okay, so let's tap into this. How do we get around those things you just mentioned, far as, because you said they kind of tie you in to being a driver, right, instead of being a traveler. So how do we get around that?
Well, it's not easily done, but because we need to work two ways. One is defending ourselves in traffic stops with a proper defense, which I propose. And then the other one is if we've been arrested in any way for a traffic offense, we have grounds for lawsuit for damage, false arrest on 2 grounds. There are 2 grounds for arrest. I'm sorry, for a lawsuit in a traffic stop. In other words, we take the offensive one by one to sue. One is the misuse of the statute and the abuse that the officer put us in arresting us or charging us even in a traffic offense when we make it clear that we're not involved in commerce. And then the second one is when we're arrested on the spot, there's a violation of another law. There are 2 laws here that are being abused routinely. One is the main traffic enforcement law. It's called Title 55. And then the other one's in another title, and that deals with arrest powers. And in that law, that's a separate line of reporting on my platform, is arrest by officer without a warrant. An officer cannot arrest anybody on the spot for driving on revoked or suspended or without. He can't. They do it all the time, though. Especially if African-American people I've written about, like Jimmy Lee Moore, for example, who lives, I think it's Bishop Street, or I forgot the name, but anyway, he lives in Eastdale.
Yeah, I know Jimmy.
Like that. You know Jimmy? Okay. Well, I covered his case pretty extensively. He was arrested for having a revoked license. That's improper. The statute allows, well, maybe we don't want to talk about that, but it's a separate violation routinely done, and especially against the weak and the poor. They'll let me go and they'll cite me, but they'll haul Jimmy Lee Moore in, and that's not right. If you're a poor African American, you're likely to be in that jail for many hours and in violation of that law. So these are lawsuit grounds to sue for damages. And because I gave notice to the city and the county, and also East Ridge and Red Bank, a lawsuit generates extra damages because the actions were done knowingly and intentionally. My goal has been to reduce the defense that the cop and his employer have. And that defense is always, well, we didn't intentionally or knowingly violate either of these 2 laws. But when you put these parties on notice, they can't use that defense. And so what's happened is their arrest of you is done in bad faith and with malice. That brings more reward from the jury when you get damages. Roland.
So how is it? You said once they stop you, that's basically an arrest once you're a traveler.
Right. Well, I'm glad you're getting down to the street, because here we are behind the wheel and we've got our foot on the brake and we put it in neutral, right? And the cop, we can see the lights flashing behind us, and the cop is coming up to the window.
Okay.
Now, what ordinarily happens is he will demand 3 things. What are they?
License, registration, and insurance.
Right. Those are the 3 proofs of being a carrier. Okay. Those are proofs that you're in the hauling and trucking business. Carriers have, those are the 3 legs of enforcement. That's how they control and regulate all people who use the road for hire, right? For private profit, private gain, as capitalists, right? It's a capitalist regulation mechanism. If you're a capitalist and you make your living on the road, then you've got to have that in order. You've just got to.
Okay.
But here you are, you're just a man who works in a restaurant, and you have a separate job with a dump truck operator, 20 hours a week. So you got 2 jobs, and you're just going to work, but you got a revoked license, and you can't afford to pay the bill to get the license restored. So what do you do? That's a serious question. He'll get your name, and he'll get you to admit that you're driving, and then he'll charge you. If you don't have insurance, he'll probably arrest you, and he may even impound your car. So what and there's no way really around these problems. Okay, so I'm thinking, well, if you're going to be arrested or charged, make the best fight and lay down the real legal situation. The real legal situation is you're not driving and you're not operating. But explaining this is kind of hard. So what I suggest that people do once they know about this notice and once they've, maybe read a little bit about it, I write a great deal about this topic on my website, that they say, officer, I'm traveling under the notice and I make no statement apart from my attorney being present. And so whatever he asks you, you don't give any information. You don't answer questions. You don't give a revoked ID, nothing, because you're not subject to him.
So
right? If he pulled you over.
So let
I'm
me
sorry?
ask you this. I don't mean to cut you off. So instead of giving your license, registration, and insurance, you should make that statement.
Well, let's say you don't have insurance and you have a revoked license. If you give those to him, you are admitting that you are a driver, right? And and now look, you're a driver confessing against yourself that your license is revoked and your insurance is, you don't have insurance. The car is properly registered, let's just say. So you got one thing right and two things wrong, which they say are crimes. These are not crimes, Roland. These are just administrative breaches. That's all they're kind of